series through 1 Peter tonight. Did hear from the crew that is in Israel. They arrived in Tel Aviv. It was 9:30 our time when I got a text from Logan, and they were headed to the motel. So I think they're probably sleeping right now, but they had a good trip. Everybody was healthy, wealthy, and wise, I guess, still, so that's good. 1 Peter chapter 5. Before we begin tonight in taking a look at the text, there's a few things I just want for you to be thinking about as we go into this in this particular study. One, in this particular text, especially in chapter 5, there is an awful lot of Peter in this text. And so what I'd like for you to do is kind of take just a moment and reflect back on the life of Peter and think about some of the things that he participated in while he was in the Gospels. So you remember he spent a lot of time with Jesus. So he saw a lot of his teaching. He saw a lot of his miracles. Peter was always the one that was up front with Jesus. Jesus had to get on to him a time or two because he was so impetuous about things. Remember, Peter was the one that denied his Lord 3 times, and then 3 times was reinstated in John chapter 21. He saw his Lord crucified and died before him, and then saw him resurrected. So I think all of these things are going to kind of be in the mind of Peter as he concludes this letter, because as we look back, what has been one of the main themes that Logan, and I haven't been in every one of these, but what's been one of the main themes that Logan has pulled out of this text? We looked at it last week, I know.
Suffering of Christ.
The suffering. That's been a big deal in this text. And as Charles said, Peter is encouraging the church to share in these sufferings. And obviously, now the letter was written probably early to mid-60s. So really the persecution of the church from Nero has not really started, at least not in haste yet, but it's fixing to. We're right on the cusp of that persecution that Nero's going to be bringing on the church. And I was reading a commentary today, and the commentary said, the author said that he thinks that a lot of the kind of the pre-Nero persecution was beginning already. So the Christians here that were scattered throughout Pontia, Galatia, Bithynia, Asia, are already experiencing some of that, although they're kind of separate from Rome. But they're right on the cusp of this. Peter's trying to get them ready for this suffering. So with all that in mind, let's take a look at chapter 5 and verse 1. Therefore, Peter begins, I exhort the elders among you, as your fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ, and a partaker also of the glory that is to be revealed, shepherd the flock of God among you, exercising oversight not under compulsion, but voluntarily, according to the will of God, not for sordid gain, but for eagerness, yet not lording it over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be an example to the flock. So I want for us to notice the very first word that he starts with is the word therefore. So remember, anytime we're in Bible study and we run across that word therefore, we need to go back a little bit to make sure that we got the right context. So let's just scoot back a little bit, back up to about verse 12 of chapter 4. This is part of the study from Logan last week. Let's read starting verse 12. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery ordeal among you, which comes upon you for your testing as though something strange were happening to you. But to the degree that you share in the sufferings of Christ, keep on rejoicing, so that also at the revelation of his glory you may rejoice with exultation. If you are reviled for the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests on you. Make sure that none of you suffers as a murderer or a thief or an evildoer or a troublesome meddler. But if anyone suffers as a Christian, he is not to be ashamed, but is to glorify God in his name. For if it is time for judgment to begin with the household of God, And if it begins with us first, what will be the outcome of those who have not obeyed the gospel of God? And if it was with difficulty that the righteous are saved, what will become of the godless man and the sinner? Therefore, those who suffer according to the will of God shall entrust their souls to a faithful Creator in doing what is right. Therefore, I exhort the elders. So we can't really read chapter 5, verse 1 without the end of chapter 4. So what is on the mind of Peter as he is exhorting the elders? What is he exhorting them to do? This is the New American Standard. What is he exhorting them to do? What's in his mind? Watch over the flock. Why does he need to watch over the flock? Because of the suffering that's coming. So we think through that logically. What is apt to happen to the church as the suffering comes? They may fall away. They may try to give up. They may go, I'm not going to put up with this anymore. Matter of fact, when the Nero persecution begins, that's a horrible time for the church. From the standpoint of persecution, Nero's was the first and perhaps the most severe, and then the stuff that will happen in about in the 90s with Domitian is also going to be pretty severe, but it won't be near as bad as Nero's. Nero is going to, torture Christians to their death. He will kill children in front of parents. He will fillet skin off their backs. He will feed them to the lions, and he will hang them on stakes and light up his gardens while they're impaled on stakes. This is going to be a horrible persecution that the church is fixing to go through. Peter, as he talks to the elders, he says, look, get ready to shepherd the church of God, because some hard times are coming. Now, that being said, verses 1 through 5, but 1 through 4 specifically, as he talks to the elders, I believe that this section about the eldership is as important, if not more important, as we select elders to serve congregations, as the information we find in 1 Timothy and in Titus. So most of the time, whenever we're selecting elders, we'll go and we'll take a look at 1 Timothy and Titus, and we'll grab those. There's a whole list, of qualifications there, and we'll grab those qualifications. We'll kind of go in our mind, okay, we see all those qualifications that the elder has. Those are important. I'm not saying they're not. But if we don't go to 1 Peter chapter 5 as well, then we are doing ourselves an injustice. Because I believe that a man can tick off all the boxes in 1 Timothy and Titus. If he is not a shepherd, then he does not need to be serving as a shepherd. So he may get all the boxes ticked. But unless he follows and is the kind of man that's described 1 Peter chapter 5, then we are doing ourselves an injustice as a body of believers to put a man that is a good man, but if he's not a shepherd, then he's not a shepherd and should not be placed in as a shepherd. That's my point here. So, at any rate, let's look back now at some of the words that are here. So, chapter 5, verse 1, therefore I exhort the elders among you as your fellow elder and witness of the sufferings of Christ. So, Peter says that he is a fellow elder with them. We point this out every time we go through this, but he is not the head elder. He is not the chief elder. He is not taking any of that kind of privilege or any of that kind of position on himself. He is just simply saying, I am a fellow elder with you. So he's just one of the guys, basically, is what he's saying. And then notice what he says in the rest of that. He says, and I'm a witness of the sufferings of Christ. Question, did he witness the sufferings of Christ? Remember we talked about thinking back about Peter's life? As Peter writes to those elders, he says, look, I have seen the suffering. Basically, Peter saw in his Lord what he's fixing to see in the church. Because this same type of cruel treatment and crucifixion and torture is fixing to take place with the church in the coming few years. So he says, I'm a witness of the sufferings of Christ. And then the last phrase he says, and I am a partaker also of the glory that is to be revealed. So Peter says, I have witnessed the sufferings of Christ. What glory did he witness that's going to be revealed in our future? What glory did he witness? The resurrection of Jesus Christ. So he not only saw the death, burial, he also saw the resurrection. So Peter says, I have witnessed this. Not only did he witness that resurrection, did you notice the word? I am a partaker of that glory. So what does that remind us of? Remind us of when we participated in the death, burial, and resurrection as well when we were baptized. So he says, I'm a partaker also of that glory that is to be revealed. So we see this beautiful picture that Peter sets up here in verse 1 already. Verse 2. I exhort the elders, back to verse 1, I exhort the elders among you, shepherd the flock of God that is among you. This idea of being a shepherd, in my opinion, is just so important. I've got a couple slides we'll show here in just a minute, but I want for you to think about this idea of a shepherd. Now, what does it mean when he's talking to these elders and he says they need to be shepherds? What does that communicate to us? Okay, got to lead. What else is true? Ma'am?
Watching over the flock.
Yeah, watching over the flock. And how so? Does a shepherd watch over the flock? What's that? Protects them. What else? Teaches them. Takes them out for food. Takes them out for water. I mean, leads them through green pastures, right? Psalm 23. What else, Sean? Cares for them. So let's say that, yeah, Russ.
Shepherd needs to smell like sheep, too.
Yeah, exactly right. I got that written in my notes. A shepherd will smell like the sheep. A shepherd is going to spend time with the sheep. The shepherd knows the sheep. A shepherd of the Lord's church cannot be a man who is separate from the flock. He has got to be part of the flock. And he's got to know the flock. And he's got to love the flock. And he's got to participate in the flock. If he's not, then he's not a shepherd. That's my whole point here with this. Again, a guy could have all the check marks. Click, 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 click. But if he's not a shepherd, then he's not a shepherd. He can serve in a lot of ways in the Lord's church. Not downgrading, because I know when April and I's first job in ministry, I was a youth minister intern for a congregation, and one of the elders that was there loved the man to death, but he was a CEO of a bank, and that's kind of how he ran things. He kind of ran things as a CEO. And it was kind of scary, I was kind of scared of him. I think back about that, and I'm not questioning whether, he did a great job. Just for the time we were there, how he came across to me was more of a ruler, and not necessarily a shepherd to me. And I just think that can cause some problems. So he tells the elders, he says, shepherd the flock of God among you. The second phrase he says, exercising oversight. So being an elder, of course, means that the man is older. That's presbyteros, which is an older man. Being a shepherd is a different idea than that. And then exercising oversight is yet a third idea. So exercising oversight, what does that communicate to us? It communicates to me a characteristic of that man. What characteristic does that emphasize to us? His oversight. What is that? He's a leader. What else about that? He has a vision, right? He has oversight. He has, again, loving care. He has he has a characteristic about him that is kind of above and beyond. He is able to care for those that he is with in oversight. Again, it's not like a guy with a stick driving the sheep. It's oversight. It's wisdom. I think that's the word I was looking for. It's a display of wisdom that this man has. Okay, back to the text. Let's see. Shepherd the flock of God, exercise oversight. And then he says, not under compulsion, but voluntary. So, obviously, a man that's going to serve in this capacity needs to desire that particular job. And, of course, Timothy and Titus both talk about that. According to the will of God, not for sordid gain, but with eagerness. So this man needs to be eager to do this. Verse 3, yet not lording over those allotted to your charge, but proving to be examples to the flock. And again, I'd suggest that verse 3 is absolutely crucial, that it's not a job of a governor or a dictator. I mean, it's proving to be an example. So he's living exactly the way that he wants the congregation to live. And so this again, I believe, is an absolute beautiful picture of elders and of an eldership. Then look at verse 4. And when the chief shepherd appears, you will receive the unfading crown of glory. So, chief shepherd, who's that? That's Christ, our Lord, okay? He's going to be the chief shepherd. No other chief shepherd among elders. There's only one chief. Everybody else is an engine, right? One chief. And the chief shepherd is Jesus Christ. And it is him, it is to him that the elder will answer. Sometimes, at least I know from me, from personal experience, as I view my view of elders, especially in my past, sometimes I think view elders as guard dogs. Now, to a certain extent, I would agree with that. When the wolf comes, the shepherd's going, right? But I want for us to think about what is the difference between a guard dog and a shepherd.
Guard dog has a task.
And what is that task?
To round up the sheep and take and watch them.
I put up a couple pictures to kind of describe what I'm thinking, and James is right down the road here. I want for you to notice where the dog is and where the sheep are facing. And I want for you to notice where the shepherd is and where the sheep are facing. You see the difference there?
Shepherd leads. The dog corrals, but the shepherd leads.
This, I think, is really the best comparison that I can come up with when we think about, as an elder, should I be a guard dog or should I be a shepherd? Well, I kind of need to be both, I guess. And I think elders do, but we don't need to be the dog at the back, trying to keep everybody corralled by running around and barking at them. Get in the middle. That's not shepherding. That's guard dogging, whatever comes out of my mouth. But the shepherd leads. And I couldn't find a picture to describe the second thought that I had today. But if a wolf gets into the flock, now part of the job of the shepherd is to keep the wolf away. But what if the wolf gets in and injures one of the sheep? Now, I mean, in a congregational point of view, does that not happen? Absolutely. What can a guard dog do for the sheep that has been wounded? Nothing. The guard dog might bark at them. Get back in line. You don't have time to feel bad for yourself. Get back in line. So that's what a guard dog might do. What's a shepherd going to do? Bind them up, pick them up, carry them if they need to. Do you see the distinction there? It is an absolute beautiful picture, I believe, of what Peter is describing that an eldership needs to be. It is a loving, caring oversight of leadership. Now, I want to add here, as an elder, me teaching about elders feels weird to me, and I'm not saying I've got all this figured out, so don't misunderstand me. I'm saying this is what Peter wants from me. But I do want to say that in working with our eldership here, and I've had people tell me this before, but folks, y'all got a great eldership. Excluding me, take me out of this equation. Y'all got a great eldership. I believe y'all got an eldership with shepherds, not guard dogs. And that makes me extremely pleased to be part of this congregation. Are any of us perfect? Well, Paul might be. But, we're not quite there. But we're making progress.
Another point we might bring out.
Absolutely.
Is you see the shepherd there, but no sheep knows that shepherd.
That's right. That's right.
And they're going to follow him. I saw an example one time where there's two shepherds with two groups of sheep, their own sheep, that intermingled together. got all mixed up. That guard dog couldn't figure it out.
That's right.
But when the shepherds went their own way, they visited with their flock, and they followed their shepherd.
That's right.
And I think that's such a beautiful analogy.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, and really, we could spend the rest of the night talking about this very thing. Jesus loved this concept, didn't he, of the shepherd and the sheep. Yeah, James?
That's why I said that the guard dog has a duty.
Yeah.
Even he is down to the shepherd.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
The shepherd has to tell him what to do.
That's right. That's right. And he is just the dog is really just a lording over, not voluntarily.
Right.
You know, I mean, he's, like you said, he's got a job to do. And if he doesn't do his job, then the shepherd's going to beat him, you know, or something. So, yeah, good point there. Any other thoughts about the first 5 verses here? Yeah, Billy.
Well, I guess from that, the guard dog has a job to do, and he does his job because it's his job.
That's right.
The shepherd does what he does because he loves the sheep.
That's right. Great point. And that's and the sheep love him back. I mean, they follow him wherever he goes. And it's his job, as we mentioned earlier, to take them to pasture and to take them to water. And I think they understand the shepherd is there for protection. And they no doubt, if they get a whiff of a wolf, they're running to that shepherd. There's no question in my mind that's how they would behave under those situations. So anyway, beautiful example that Peter grabs here. Now let's pull this back into the context of 1 Peter. He's talking about a congregation of Lord's people that are fixing to be going through a very difficult time, and there will no doubt be wolves that are going to sneak into the flock and are going to start chewing on their legs and crippling them up. And there's no doubt that wolves are going to be dragging some sheep off, and the shepherd, their job in the first century, I can't imagine what that was like. That had to have been the most difficult job on the planet during times of persecution, to serve as a shepherd in the Lord's church, especially when Nero was bringing on the persecution. That's right. Yeah, great point. I don't know if you heard that. Betty Jo said that the sheep respond to the dog out of fear, and they have love and respect for the shepherd. That's why they're following. That's why he's out front. Another great point. Well, let's move on down to the text so we can get a little bit further. The elders. So the first group that Peter writes to in this context of suffering is the eldership. The eldership's got to be in place. They've got to have the right attitudes. They got to be looking out for the flock because difficult times are coming. The next group that he is going to address in verse 5 is going to be the young men. Now, question. I don't know that I've got a good answer for this. But why is he now addressing the young men? Later on here, he does not really address the women. He does address the young men. I've got a couple theories here, but why do you think? What? I think that's exactly right. If we were going to say what group is most likely to either follow this kind of weird cultic teaching that the Romans are bringing in, what group is perhaps most likely to run for their lives when persecution, it's probably the young men. My experience with young women is that they're going to stand there and go, "You just try to get me out of here." You know, that's really kind of their attitude. I think young men they're kind of immature and they've got some growing up to do. So whatever the reason is for sure, I don't know. Peter says, I've got to address them. So verse 5, you younger men likewise be subject to your elders. That's that idea of keeping them in the flock. Okay, listen to the guys, is what he's telling the young men. Be subject to your elders, and all of you, so here's the whole body, and all of you, clothe yourselves with humility towards one another. For God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. This idea of clothing yourself with humility, Peter does something kind of neat here, again in the text. As you think about clothing yourself with something, does that remind anybody of something that Christians do? When we were baptized into Christ, what does it say? We have been clothed with Christ. That's the same word. Peter uses that again. We are clothed with Christ, and here he says, clothe yourself with humility towards one another. So he's hitting on this idea of being humble and not being proud. And he will say, matter of fact, he will quote from the Proverbs, for God is opposed to the proud, but gives grace to the humble. He will then say in verse 6, therefore, humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God, that he may exalt you at the proper time. So as we think about these ideas of humility and pride, we place this in the context of the suffering. What might be going on in the mind of a young man? He's being encouraged to submit to the elders. He's being encouraged to stay humble. What's going on in the mind of this young man? What is perhaps society offering him? Perhaps. Maybe that's a better question. What's that? Yeah, and I think for young men, that's probably a big one. The idea of I can be free, I can run my own life. Instead of going down this road here where life is going to be difficult, I'm going to take Nero up on his request. I'm going to deny Christ, and I'm going to become somebody now in Nero's new world, or whatever the thought might be there. So again, I think there's this tendency towards pride. He tells them two different times, clothe yourself with humility towards one another. And then he says again in verse 6, therefore humble yourselves under the mighty hand of God. I love that phrase, under the mighty hand of God. I jotted down this question. How can we do that? How can we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God? What is it that we need to do to humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God?
Give God the glory.
He has got to receive all the glory for everything that's going on. Whether it's good times or whether we're in the persecution. We're not blaming him, we're giving him glory because we are under his mighty hand. What else does that tell us?
Submit.
What's that? Submission. One of the things that I thought was interesting here, he tells the young men to submit to the elders. When we humble ourselves under the mighty hand of God, that is also submission. And again, I would suggest, what is the motivation for the submission here? Is it out of fear, or is it out of love and respect and honor? Yeah. It's out of love and respect and honor because of who they are, because of who the elders are, the young men need to submit to them because they understand the elders have their best future in mind for them. And also we submit to the mighty hand of God because we understand He's got what's best for us. We may not understand it in this lifetime. We may never understand the suffering. I may never understand why my dad had to die at 58 of colon cancer. We've all been through those. I don't know. But I'm going to submit myself to the mighty hand of the one who does know, and that's our God. So he says, submit yourselves under the mighty hand of God that He may exalt you. And he says exalt you at the proper time. So what do you think Peter has in mind what's the proper time? What's that? Probably the coming of the Lord is what's in Peter's mind. It's not going to happen during the lifetime of most of these folks. It's not going to happen in their lifetime. Because most of these folks probably in the next 10 years are going to be killed by Nero. So he's trying to get them ready for that. But at the right time, at the proper time, God will exalt. And so there's this idea that we have got to hold on to the mighty hand of God regardless of what we're going through. This should help us in difficulties, in sickness, in death. It should help us through temptation. We need to hold on to the mighty hand of God because that's the only way that we're going to make it through. And if we don't, we let go of the mighty hand of God, then we're just going to suffer those consequences, which that's not a good option either. So hold on to the mighty hand of God. I jotted one other question down. Think about what Peter saw. Here, this is another first-person idea. Do you think Peter knew what it meant to be under the care of the mighty hand of God? You think Peter knew what that meant? He lived for 3 years under the mighty hand of God, literally, while he walked with Jesus on this planet. Now he's serving as an elder, and I believe is experiencing the same thing. He continues to walk under the mighty hand of God. And we don't have record of this in Scripture, but as Logan was talking last week, it's very possible that within about 2 years of when Peter writes this letter was maybe written 65, probably in about 67, Peter will be killed by the Nero persecution that's going to come. And the tradition is that he was hung upside down because he was crucified upside down because he didn't want to be in the same position as his Lord when he died. So, do you think Peter understands what proper time is? Yeah. I don't know if God revealed to him what was going to be his future, but I think Peter knew. Peter knew the difficult time was coming. And he said, submit yourself, put yourself under the mighty hand of God. Then look at verse 7. He continues that, describes this a little bit. He says, casting all your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. So just that idea, again, that concept of Him being the chief shepherd is again a beautiful statement. Verse 8, he continues with instruction to the young men. Be of sober spirit, be on the alert. So, be sharp, have good vision, pay attention to what's going on, stay firm. He says, be of sober spirit, be on the alert. Your adversary, the devil, prowls around like a roaring lion, seeking someone to devour. Now, 2 things I want to point out here. This word adversary that is here is an interesting Greek word that he uses. This is a Greek word for the person that you would meet in a court of law that is suing you. That's the word that he uses. So, and think about that from the point of view of Satan. Satan is going to take us before God and try to convince God that we're not good enough to go to heaven. I mean, that's, of course, that's in our minds, that's kind of how we can describe Satan's job. So he is our adversary. He is the one that is against us. He's the one that's coming against us. So your adversary uses that word. The devil, and I love this word, prowls around like a roaring lion. When a lion is prowling around looking for food, who's he looking for? The what? The weak, the ones that have been beat up. The one that fell off the rock and hurt its leg? The one the wolf hurt but didn't kill? That's the one Satan's looking for. He is prowling around looking for someone to devour. Now, for me, that is another statement that reflects back on, I think, on all of us, but I think especially reflects back on the eldership. That we need to be aware that Satan is prowling around looking for hurt sheep. Yeah, Sean.
He's also looking for that person who's not with the others.
Oh, yeah, exactly. He's looking for the sheep that's wandered off by himself, isn't he? Exactly right. Exactly. Again, beautiful imagery that Peter uses here. And again, I would suggest, does Peter have firsthand experience with Satan and wandering and denials? Boy, he can speak from firsthand experience here, can he? Through the grace of God, Peter was brought back to the fold, but he almost got ate up. So again, kind of interesting, his use of some of these symbols. Then verse 9, he says, "But resist him, firm in your faith, knowing that the same experiences of suffering are being accomplished by your brethren who are in the world." So this suffering that the church is about to go through is nothing new, and it's fixing to happen in all of the known world. So he said this is going to be a very common type of suffering. Verse 10, "After you have suffered for a little while, the God of all grace, who called you into his eternal glory in Christ, will himself perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish you." Those last four words that are found in verse 10, I could probably preach 4 sermons on. That is absolutely beautiful Greek words that he uses there. In short, the word perfect us means he's going to make us complete. To confirm us means that he is making us ready for attack. To strengthen us means that he is going to steady us against the storm. And to establish us means that he is going to help us lay the foundation. So all of those are reflecting ahead into the persecution that is coming. He's going to make them complete, make them ready for the attack, make them be able to stand against the storm, and they're going to have a firm foundation, and they are not moving. So all of those things is what God is going to bring to the table: perfect, confirm, strengthen, and establish. Verse 11, "To him be dominion forever and ever. Amen." So again, as Peter about closes here, he uses what we would call a doxology, just a short statement of praise at the end of this thought. To him be dominion forever and ever. Amen. And then verse 12, 13, 14, just closing remarks. "Through Silas, our faithful brother, for so I regard him, I have written to you briefly, exhorting and testifying that this is the true grace of God. Stand firm in it." We need another hour to talk about the true grace of God. Again, I would suggest Peter, of all the writers in the New Testament, Paul understood this as well. Peter understood what the true grace of God was, because he has experienced that idea of being in a position where he should have never been, eaten up by Satan, to being brought back to the fold into a relationship with God. And he says, this is the true grace, is what we're talking about. By the way, the word grace in the book of 1 Peter is used 8 times. Its frequency, it is the highest frequency of any book in the New Testament. So 8 times in these, I don't remember, 140 verses or whatever's in here. So grace is on his mind quite a bit. That again is a really neat study. And then, "She who is in Babylon, chosen together with you, sends you greetings. So does my son Mark. Greet one another with a kiss of love. Peace be to you who are in Christ." One last comment, verse 13, when it says, "She who is in Babylon," there's a lot of discussion about what in the world that is. Kind of the two sides of that is, there is a group that believe that he is in the actual city of Babylon as he writes this. The other side says that he is actually in the city of Rome, that he is writing this from Rome. Remember in the book of Revelation, John is going to refer to Babylon, but he's referring back to the city of Rome. So a third possibility is that he is using the world at large as a Babylon, a city of a place of rebellion and persecution. So those are kind of the three options there for Babylon at that end. Thank you very much for your attention. I've enjoyed the couple of pieces I've got to teach. I've really enjoyed the study. A new class next week. We will be starting the book of Proverbs. We're going to do select studies from Proverbs. I think I'll have to ask Michael. Is that Wednesday night? I think that's what we're doing in here on Wednesday nights. So.